I never imagined that the man I loved for more than 20 years could betray me in such a cruel way. It all started when my son, Ethan, got engaged to a lovely young woman named Sophie. She was sweet, polite, and I treated her like my own daughter. Everyone in the family adored her, especially my husband, Richard. At first, I thought he just liked her as a future daughter-in-law, but soon I began to notice small things, the way he looked at her, the way they laughed together when they thought I wasn't watching. One night, Ethan was out of town for work, and Sophie stayed at our house. I couldn't sleep, so I went to check on everyone. When I opened my son's room door, my heart stopped. Richard and Sophie were there, together. My world shattered in that single moment. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream, couldn't believe what my eyes saw. That night changed my life forever. I lost my husband, my peace, and the family I thought would last a lifetime. When I look back now, it almost feels unreal, like my life back then belonged to someone else. Everything seemed so calm, so perfect, so safe. We were the kind of family people in our neighborhood admired. My husband, Richard, was a respected man, confident, well-spoken, and dependable. And I, Margaret, was the kind of wife who believed that love, once built on trust, could never fall apart. Richard and I had been married for almost 3 decades. We'd been through so much together. The struggles of our early years, raising a child, paying bills, celebrating birthdays and anniversaries. We weren't rich, but we had peace. We had laughter. I used to wake up every morning to the smell of his coffee and his voice humming softly to the radio. Those small moments, the kind you don't realize are precious until they're gone, made me feel content. Our son, Ethan, was our pride. He was the kind of boy every mother dreams of, gentle, hardworking, and deeply kind. He had his father's calmness, but my sensitivity. When he graduated from university, I remember crying tears of joy. Richard hugged me that day and whispered, "We did good, didn't we?" And I truly believed we had. Then, Ethan met Sophie. The first time he brought her home, I could tell he was nervous, the way young men are when they introduce someone special. Sophie walked into our living room with flowers in her hands and that sweet, nervous smile that immediately warmed my heart. She was polite, soft-spoken, and had this way of making everyone around her feel at ease. I liked her instantly. Over time, Sophie became like a daughter to me. She would come over to help me cook on weekends, ask me about my favorite recipes, and tell me about her childhood. We'd sit together for hours, talking about life, about love, about marriage. Sometimes she'd even say, "You and Mr. Richard are goals, you know that?" And I'd laugh, feeling proud of the relationship I thought we had built. Richard seemed to like her too, maybe a little too much, though I didn't see it that way back then. He'd always compliment her cooking or ask her about her studies or plans. I thought it was harmless, even sweet. I'd tease him sometimes, saying, "You'll spoil her before the wedding," and he'd just smile. Life felt full again. The house that had grown quieter as Ethan got older suddenly had laughter echoing through it once more. Sophie's presence brought a youthful light back into our home. I used to tell Richard that she was a blessing, and he would nod in agreement. Looking back, that memory feels like a cruel joke from fate. When Ethan finally proposed to Sophie, it was one of the happiest days of my life. He did it at our house, right there in the backyard, under the lights we had hung for the small dinner party. Sophie said yes through tears, and we all hugged each other. I remember thinking, this is what happiness feels like. After that, everything revolved around the wedding, the dress, the venue, the guest list. I was so wrapped up in the excitement that I didn't notice the subtle changes around me. The quiet glances, the awkward silences, the times when Richard and Sophie would exchange small smiles when they thought no one was watching. It's strange how life gives us warnings, soft whispers before the storm, but love makes us deaf. I ignored every sign, every uneasy feeling in my gut, because I wanted to believe that my family was perfect. I had no idea that behind those gentle smiles and sweet words, something dark was growing, something that would soon shatter everything I believed in. At first, it was nothing, just little moments that I brushed off. I kept telling myself, "I'm imagining things, Margaret." He's your husband, your family, your son's fiancé, everything is fine. But deep down, a small, uneasy feeling began creeping into my heart. It started with the way Richard looked at Sophie. I remember one evening, we were all in the living room, talking about Ethan's college reunion. Sophie was laughing at something Richard said, tilting her head in a way that made my chest tighten for reasons I didn't understand at the time. Richard's eyes lingered on her, just a fraction too long. I told myself it was innocent. He was just being kind like any father would be. But then the little things kept happening. He would call her when she wasn't around just to check in, or ask about her day a little too often. He started complimenting her in ways that made me uncomfortable. "You look lovely today," or "That dress suits you so well." I hadn't heard him say those things to me in years. And every time I brought it up, he laughed it off like I was overthinking, like my imagination was playing tricks on me. I also began noticing their secretive whispers. Sometimes I'd be in the kitchen, and I'd hear them talking softly in another room. Not normal conversations, the kind that fall silent immediately when they notice you're listening. I tried to dismiss it as harmless plotting for wedding plans, but the tension in the air was undeniable. It made my stomach churn in ways I couldn't explain. Then there were the subtle gestures. A hand brushing across a table, a small smile exchanged across the room, a glance that lasted just a second too long. Every time, my heart would tighten, but I would convince myself, "No, you're imagining it. He's your husband. He wouldn't." I also noticed that Richard started acting differently around me. He would be distant at times, lost in thought, almost guilty. And sometimes he would snap at me for little things that never mattered before, and then apologize immediately with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was confusing. I didn't understand why he was acting this way. I thought it might just be stress from work, fatigue, or even middle age catching up. Sophie, too, changed in subtle ways. She started arriving earlier than needed, staying later than necessary, always finding excuses to be around the house when Ethan wasn't there. She seemed nervous when I was nearby, and sometimes her eyes would dart to Richard, as if seeking approval. I couldn't put my finger on it, but something didn't feel right. Despite all of these signs, I told myself to trust them. I wanted to believe in the people I loved. I wanted to believe that my husband of decades would never betray me. I wanted to believe that my son's fiancé, who had grown so close to me, would never do something so cruel. But the universe, I learned later, has a way of showing us the truth in the smallest ways before it hits us like a storm. The laughter I overheard, the secret glances, the lingering touches, they were all warnings, whispers of betrayal that I refused to hear. And yet I was blind. My heart, my trust, my love for my family made me deaf to the truth. I convinced myself that I was being paranoid, that I was imagining everything. But deep inside, in the quiet moments when I was alone, I felt it, a shadow creeping into my home, a subtle shift that I couldn't ignore forever. Little did I know that these subtle signs were just the beginning, that the unease I felt, the tiny whispers and lingering looks, would soon erupt into a reality so devastating that it would change my life forever. It was a Friday evening, a night that began like any other, and yet it became the moment my life split into before and after. Ethan had left for a 2-day business trip, and Sophie, his fiancée, was staying at our house for convenience. I remember thinking nothing of it at first. After all, our home had always been open to her. But that evening, there was an uneasiness I couldn't shake. A small, nagging whisper in my chest warned me that something was off. I tried to distract myself. I went upstairs to my bedroom, curled up with a book, hoping that reading would soothe my uneasy heart. But I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting to the subtle signs I had noticed over the past weeks, the lingering glances, the secretive smiles, the whispers I had overheard. I told myself I was imagining things, but a deep, cold knot of fear had begun to form in my stomach. Hours passed. The house was unusually quiet. Richard wasn't in the living room, nor was he in the kitchen. Sophie was supposed to be in her room, but I hadn't heard her in a while. I tried calling out, "Richard? Sophie," but there was no response. Only the faint ticking of the clock and the hum of the refrigerator answered me. Then I heard it, a soft laugh, almost a whisper, coming from Ethan's room. My heart skipped a beat. At first, I froze. No, it can't be, I told myself. But the laughter continued, hushed and nervous, yet intimate. My pulse quickened. My hands began to shake as I slowly made my way down the hallway. Each step felt heavier than the last, my breath catching with every movement. I didn't want to believe it, but a dreadful certainty was forming in my mind. When I reached Ethan's room, I hesitated. My hand hovered over the doorknob, my chest tightening, as if I were about to dive into an ocean I couldn't swim in. And then, trembling, I pushed the door open. The sight that met my eyes is something I will never forget for as long as I live. There, in the middle of Ethan's room, were Richard and Sophie, together. The intimacy, the betrayal, the sheer audacity of it all hit me like a physical blow. My legs gave way, and I leaned against the doorframe for support. Richard's face turned pale as he froze, caught like a deer in headlights. Sophie's eyes widened in panic, and she tried to cover herself with the blanket. Time seemed to stand still. I couldn't speak. My mind screamed, but my lips refused to move. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, to call for help, but the words stuck in my throat. I could only stare, feeling my heart shatter piece by piece. Richard finally managed to say, "Margaret, it's not what it looks like." His voice was frantic, pleading. But how could it not be what it looked like? The truth was unavoidable, undeniable, and it crushed me completely. I turned my gaze to Sophie, the young woman who had once called me Mom, and whom I had loved like a daughter. Her face was streaked with tears. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. I whispered, my voice trembling, "Ethan loved you. He trusted you. How could you do this to him?" Sophie sobbed uncontrollably. I didn't mean for it to happen.
I didn't want this. I'm sorry, Margaret.
I truly am. Her words were hollow, meaningless against the enormity of the betrayal. I couldn't bear to look at Richard anymore. The man I had loved and trusted for decades, the father of my son, my partner through life, was standing there, guilty, ashamed, and yet somehow still expecting forgiveness. My heart felt like it had been ripped from my chest. I turned and walked out, needing space to breathe, needing to escape the unbearable reality. The rest of the night was a blur. I wandered through the house, unable to sleep, unable to eat, unable to process the enormity of what I had seen. Every corner of the house felt tainted, every memory now poisoned by betrayal. I kept picturing the laughter I had once thought was innocent, the whispered conversations I had ignored, and suddenly, everything made sense. By morning, the house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirping of birds outside. Richard tried to explain, offering excuses about loneliness, confusion, and mistakes. Each word felt like salt on a fresh wound. I couldn't forgive him. I couldn't even face him. I told him to leave, and he did, without another word. Sophie packed her things and left before Ethan returned. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now felt empty and cold. The betrayal had left its mark, an invisible scar that would remain forever. That night changed everything. The family I had trusted, the people I had loved, were not who I thought they were. My world had shattered in a single, unbearable moment, a moment that would haunt me for the rest of my life. I stood there in the doorway, frozen, my mind unable to comprehend what I was seeing. Richard and Sophie were caught in the act, and their eyes met mine with panic and guilt. For a moment, there was silence, heavy, suffocating, and unbearable. I wanted to scream, to yell, to demand explanations, but all I could do was clutch the edge of the doorframe and tremble. Richard finally found his voice, though it was shaky, almost pleading. "Margaret, it's not what it looks like." I laughed bitterly, a hollow, broken sound. "Not what it looks like?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "Richard, I saw you. I saw everything." Sophie covered herself with the blanket, her tears streaming freely. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean for this to happen. I swear I didn't. Didn't mean for this to happen? I cut her off, my voice rising, trembling with fury and heartbreak. Sophie, you called me Mom. You laughed with me, shared your secrets, and I welcomed you into my home. And this is what you do? Betray the one person who trusted you completely. Richard's hands shook as he tried to step forward, pleading. Margaret, I love you. I made a mistake. I shook my head violently. A mistake? A mistake? You betrayed me, Richard. You betrayed Ethan. You betrayed the family we built together. There's no excuse. There's nothing you can say that will undo this. Sophie's sobs grew louder. Please, Margaret. I never wanted to hurt anyone. I never meant to. Me? Ethan? Hurt anyone. I shouted, my chest tight with rage and despair. Do you even understand what you've done? Do you know the life you've destroyed? You've taken everything I trusted and turned it to ashes. Richard lowered his gaze, shame written all over his face. I could see the man I loved, the man I once believed was my partner for life, reduced to a trembling, guilty shadow of himself. And it broke me even more, knowing I had trusted him for decades, only to be met with lies and betrayal. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. My heart ached, my mind spun with disbelief, but I forced my voice to remain calm, even if it quivered. You two leave. Leave my house. Both of you. And don't expect me to forgive you. Not now, not ever. You've crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. You've destroyed everything. Sophie tried to speak again, but I didn't want to hear it. Her apologies were meaningless. She left silently, tears streaking her face, and Richard followed, slamming the door behind him. For the first time in decades, I was completely alone in my own home. The silence was deafening. Every corner, every memory, every photograph reminded me of the trust one had given and the betrayal I had suffered. I sank onto the sofa, my hands shaking, my chest heaving. I felt hollow, empty, and utterly broken. The family I had loved and nurtured, the home I had built with my heart, had been shattered in one night. And there was no turning back. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. The images of what I had seen kept replaying in my mind. Richard and Sophie, their laughter, the betrayal. Every memory of our family, every picture on the walls, every corner of the house, felt tainted. I sat in the living room for hours, staring blankly at the photographs of happier times. Ethan's childhood birthdays, family vacations, our wedding day, and realized that everything I had trusted was gone. When morning finally came, the sun streaming softly through the curtains felt cruelly normal, as if the world hadn't noticed the destruction in my life. Richard had left silently during the night, and Sophie had already packed her things and left before Ethan returned from his trip. The house, once filled with warmth, chatter, and laughter, felt empty and alien. I wandered from room to room, feeling the weight of silence pressing down on me. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of the wind outside the window, reminded me of what had happened. I knew I had to tell Ethan. I couldn't let him return to a house that hid such a secret, but I also feared the consequences. How could I possibly explain that the two people he trusted most had betrayed him in the worst possible way? How could I even begin to articulate the magnitude of what I had witnessed? My chest ached, my throat burned, and my hands trembled as I tried to find the right words. When Ethan walked through the door, smiling, exhausted from his trip, my heart broke all over again. He looked so happy, so unaware of the storm waiting for him inside. I took a deep breath and told him everything. Slowly, carefully, I recounted what I had seen, how Richard and Sophie had betrayed our trust, and how I had confronted them. I watched him as his expression changed, the initial confusion giving way to disbelief, then to hurt, and finally to heartbreak. He didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. He just stood there, silent, staring at me with wide eyes and trembling lips. Finally, in a quiet, broken voice, he said, "You should have told me the moment you noticed something, Mom." His words pierced me deeper than anything else. He was right. I had seen the signs, had felt the unease, but I had ignored it. I had wanted to believe in my family, in the people I loved, and in the life we had built. My denial had caused even more pain, and now I had to live with the consequences. The rest of the day passed in silence. Ethan retreated to his room, refusing to talk or eat. I tried to reach out to him, to comfort him, but he pushed me away gently, telling me he needed time. I sat in the living room, staring at the walls, feeling the emptiness press into my soul. The betrayal was not just theirs. In some way, it was mine too, for ignoring the warning signs, for turning a blind eye to the subtle shifts in our home. As the hours passed, I began to understand the true cost of trust broken. Love, once given freely and without question, can be weaponized in ways you never imagine. Family, the one place you think is safe, can become the source of the deepest pain. And sometimes, the people you hold closest are the ones who inflict the greatest wounds. By evening, I realized that life had irrevocably changed. The laughter and warmth that had filled our home were gone, replaced by silence and the weight of betrayal. Yet, amidst the sorrow, I also felt a small spark, a quiet strength growing within me. I knew I had survived the shock, and that somehow I would find a way to rebuild, to heal, and to protect myself and my son from further pain. That morning marked the end of innocence for me. The house that had once been a sanctuary had become a reminder of what could be lost, and the betrayal I had witnessed would forever alter the way I viewed trust, love, and family. The days after that night felt surreal, like I was living in a dream I desperately wanted to wake from. The betrayal I had witnessed had not only shattered me, it had broken the heart of the person I loved most, my son, Ethan. He returned home the morning after everything had happened, completely unaware of the storm that had taken place while he was away. When I told him, the expression on his face was something I will never forget: disbelief, confusion, heartbreak, and a silent question of how the people he trusted most could have done this to him. For a moment, he didn't say a word. He just stood there, staring at me with wide, hurt eyes, as if trying to process the impossible truth. My heart ached for him. I wanted to reach out, to hold him, to apologize, even though I had done nothing wrong. But the weight of betrayal was too heavy, too raw. Finally, in a voice so quiet it almost broke, he said, "You should have told me the moment you noticed something, Mom." His words pierced me like a knife. I realized he was right. I had seen the subtle signs, the glances, the whispered conversations. I had felt the unease growing inside me, but I had turned a blind eye because I wanted to believe in the family I loved. My denial had caused more pain than the betrayal itself. Ethan retreated to his room after that, shutting the door behind him, leaving me alone in the living room with nothing but the echo of his heartbreak. Hours passed. He didn't eat, he didn't speak, and he barely moved. I tried knocking on his door, tried to coax him out, tried to comfort him, but he just whispered, "I need time, Mom. Please, just give me time." I obeyed, though my heart was breaking for both of us. The silence was heavy, almost unbearable. Every creak of the house, every distant sound, reminded me of what had been lost: the family trust, the warmth, the love that had once filled these rooms. Ethan's pain was different from mine. Mine was betrayal, confusion, and heartbreak. His was disillusionment, anger, and a sense of loss so deep that it made him retreat into himself. I watched him quietly, observing the way he stared at the floor, the way his hands fidgeted, the way he avoided my gaze. He was a young man who had believed in the goodness of the people around him, and now that belief had been shattered. In the days that followed, he barely spoke to me, and when he did, it was with a calmness that was more frightening than his anger. He would ask questions in a detached tone. Did they ever think about how much this would hurt us? Did they even care? I had no answers. I could only nod, tears streaming down my face, feeling helpless in the face of his pain. I realized that no apology, no explanation, could ever erase what had happened. The family we had built with love and trust had crumbled in one night, leaving only fragments of what had once been whole. Ethan moved out shortly after that. He needed space, a safe place to process the betrayal, to heal his wounded heart. Our home felt emptier than ever, the silence so thick that it pressed against my chest. I would sit in the living room, staring at the walls, remembering the laughter and warmth that had once filled the rooms. And yet, I also began to see the fragility of trust, how easily it could be broken, how profoundly it could wound those we love most. There were moments when Ethan would call, his voice still tinged with sadness. We would speak in short sentences, sharing small details of our days, trying to reconnect. But the distance between us, both emotional and physical, was undeniable. He was healing, slowly, and I knew I had to let him take that journey on his own. Through all this, I realized something painful and profound. The betrayal did not only harm me, it reshaped Ethan's understanding of love, trust, and family. It forced him to confront a reality far harsher than any mother should ever allow her child to face. And yet, there was resilience in his silence, strength in his quiet determination to move forward. I, too, had to find my own strength. I had to survive the shock, the grief, and the emptiness. We were both broken, but we were still here. And that, I realized, was the first step toward healing, acknowledging the pain, facing the betrayal, and finding a way to continue living, even when life had been irrevocably altered. That was the aftermath. The days, weeks, and months that followed were filled with silence, reflection, and the slow, painful process of understanding the true depth of betrayal. Ethan's pain became my mirror, showing me the consequences of trust misplaced, the fragility of human hearts, and the enduring power of resilience. Even now, I see the shadow of that night in our lives. But in that shadow, there is also a lesson. Love can be broken, trust can be shattered, but healing is possible. And even in the face of unimaginable pain, we can find the strength to rebuild, to protect ourselves, and to grow stronger together. Sitting alone in the quiet of my home, I often replay that night in my mind. The betrayal, the shock, the heartbreak, it all comes back in waves. At first, I wanted to blame everyone. Richard, Sophie, even myself for not seeing the signs sooner. But over time, I realized that pain teaches lessons in ways no other experience can. I've learned that trust, once broken, leaves a scar that never fully heals. It's not something that can be brushed aside or forgiven easily. Trust is fragile, delicate, and when shattered, it reshapes everything you believed about the people around you. Richard had been my partner, the father of my son, my closest confidant, yet his actions reminded me that even the people we love most can surprise us in the worst ways. I've also learned that denial is dangerous. For weeks, I ignored the subtle signs, telling myself I was imagining things, refusing to face the uneasy feelings growing in my chest. I didn't want to see the truth because I loved my family. But love without awareness can be blinding. I realize now that acknowledging discomfort and confronting difficult realities early can prevent a lot of suffering. Pain has also shown me the strength we didn't know we had. Watching Ethan retreat into himself, witnessing his heartbreak, yet seeing him slowly find his footing again, that resilience amazed me. And I, too, discovered that within the depths of grief and betrayal, there is a quiet, enduring strength. I survived shock, anger, sadness, and disbelief, and each day I rebuilt a little more of myself. I've learned that healing is not linear. Some days I feel strong. Other days, a memory or a reminder drags me back into despair. But healing is about moving forward, even when the past is heavy. It's about forgiving ourselves for the things we didn't see and learning to protect our hearts in the future. Perhaps the most important lesson is that betrayal does not define you. It changes you, yes, but it also teaches you to value honesty, loyalty, and self-respect. I have learned to be cautious with trust, but not to close my heart entirely. I've learned that I am stronger than I ever imagined, that pain can coexist with hope, and that even after devastation, life can still have beauty and meaning. Now, when I look back, I don't just see the betrayal, I see the growth it forced upon me. I see a woman who has endured heartbreak, who has faced unimaginable pain, and who is learning to live again, cautiously, carefully, but with an unbroken spirit. Pain changed me, yes, but it also revealed the resilience, courage, and wisdom that were always inside me. Even in the darkness of betrayal, I've discovered light, the light of understanding, self-awareness, and the knowledge that no one can take away the strength I've found within myself. Almost a year has passed since that fateful night, the night my world shattered. And yet, as I sit here today, I realize that despite all the pain, betrayal, and heartbreak, life has a way of moving forward, whether we're ready for it or not. That night changed me in ways I could never have imagined. It stripped me of illusions, forced me to confront the fragility of trust, and taught me lessons I might never have learned otherwise. But it also gave me something unexpected, the chance to find myself again. The first few months were the hardest. Our home, once full of laughter, warmth, and the comfort of family, had become a place of silence and echoes. I would sit in the living room, staring at the empty walls, remembering happier times, and sometimes I would break down completely. Every photograph, every memory felt like a knife twisting in my heart. I mourned not just the betrayal, but the family I thought I had, the trust one had given freely, and the life I believed was secure. Ethan and I had to navigate the aftermath carefully. At first, he avoided me, and I understood why. He needed space to process his own pain, to grieve the father and the fiancée he had once trusted. Our conversations were short, cautious, and sometimes painful. But slowly, we began to rebuild our connection, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. I learned to listen without judgment, to offer comfort without forcing forgiveness, and to respect the pace at which he healed. Meanwhile, I had to learn to live without Richard. Letting him go was one of the hardest things I've ever done. For decades, he had been my partner, my confidant, the person I shared my life with. Cutting him out of my daily existence left an emptiness I didn't know how to fill. But over time, I discovered that there was life beyond betrayal, that my identity was not defined by someone else's mistakes, and that I had the strength to survive on my own. I began to focus on myself in ways I hadn't before. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned: painting, gardening, reading, and writing. I started taking long walks, feeling the sun on my face, breathing in fresh air, and appreciating the small moments of life that I had previously taken for granted. Each small act of self-care, each moment of peace, reminded me that life is still beautiful, even after heartbreak. One symbolic act helped me more than anything else. One quiet evening, I removed my wedding ring. It felt strange at first, like letting go of a part of myself, but it was also liberating. It was a physical acknowledgement that the past was behind me, that I was choosing to move forward, and that I would not allow betrayal to define my future. I also learned the importance of forgiveness, not for them, but for myself. Holding on to anger and resentment only prolongs the pain. I could never forget what Richard and Sophie had done, and I could never fully forgive them, but I could release myself from the grip of hatred. Forgiveness, I realized, is about reclaiming your peace, not absolving someone else. The bond between Ethan and me has grown stronger through this ordeal. We talk more openly, share our fears and hopes, and appreciate the value of honesty and trust. I've learned that even when life breaks you, the connections that truly matter can survive, adapt, and even flourish. The pain has taught us to cherish what is real and to protect what is precious. As for me, I feel a quiet strength I hadn't known before. I have learned that betrayal, as devastating as it is, can be a teacher. It can reveal resilience you never knew existed, courage in moments of despair, and clarity in the midst of confusion. I am no longer the same woman who opened that door a year ago. I am wiser, stronger, and more self-aware. I have learned to value myself, my time, and my peace above all else. Looking forward, I know life will still bring challenges. I will still face moments of doubt, of loneliness, and of reflection. But I also know that I am capable of weathering storms, of rebuilding from broken pieces, and of finding light even in darkness. The journey of healing is ongoing, but it is real, and it is mine. So today, I embrace a new beginning. Not the family life I had imagined, not the perfect world I once believed in, but a life of authenticity, self-respect, and resilience. A life where I can love myself, support my son, and find joy in small victories. A life where the lessons of the past guide me, but do not bind me. Because sometimes, the greatest beginnings are born from the deepest pain. And while betrayal may have shattered my old life, it has also given me the opportunity to create a new one, stronger, wiser, and filled with hope. Even in the shadows of heartbreak, I have found my light. If you felt the story, don't forget to like, comment, and share your thoughts below. Subscribe to our channel for more real-life emotional stories that touch the heart. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a story that makes you feel, reflect, and connect.